Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Wednesday and welcome to our September meetup. My name is Kaya Imani. Many of you may know me from the community, but I am the new host for our LocalStack meetups. Um, and I'm very excited that you joined us. Whether you're here to learn about serverless, local cloud development, or you just want to see some cool demos, you are in the right place. Before we dive in, we want to hear from you. We usually run a question of the week poll every Wednesday on our community Slack. And if you're not a part of the community Slack, definitely use the link below Slack, the localstack.cloud, and join. That way you'll learn more about LocalStack, and as things roll out, you'll be the first to know. You'll also be able to get your questions answered. Anyway, since we're doing a meetup on a Wednesday, I thought it'd be fun to do our question of the week live. So if you're watching from YouTube, you can participate in the poll on YouTube live. And the question of the week is, what's your go-to move when a Lambda function isn't doing what you expect? Again, what's your go-to move when a Lambda function isn't doing what you expect? Do you add more logs and redeploy? You run it locally using something like LocalStack or some other mock? Do you use CloudWatch logs, trial and error, something else? If you have something else, put it in the chat. Interested to see what you guys do when you're trying to debug a Lambda. And while everybody is answering, let's go ahead and talk about what our meetup is about today, because that's what everybody's here for. Today, we have a treat. We will be chatting with Renato, Sridhar, and Tejas from AWS, and also Joel from LocalStack about the brand new LocalStack integration in the AWS Toolkit for VS Code, which is super cool. We'll talk about what that means for serverless developers and how you can start using that right away. So let's bring our speakers to the stage. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us. Let's kind of do a roundtable just to kind of get to know everyone here. Let's start with Renato. Thanks for being here. Could you give us a quick intro about what you do at AWS? And
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here. My name is Renato. I've been in AWS for more than 8 years at this point. I've always been involved in developer experience. I work in the Lambda console for some time, and then I work in different tools that our customers can use, like SAM, CDK, and been working lately with VS Code, with AWS Toolkit for VS Code, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I'm excited to be here.
great, thanks for joining. Tejas, also glad to have you here. Can you tell us a bit about your role leading Lambda at AWS?
Awesome. So I'm Tejas. I work as a senior software manager at AWS Lambda. I work here as a manager. I own 3 different verticals at Lambda. So one of them is developer experience, which is why we are here. That includes SAM CLI, console tooling that developer use while developing on Lambda. The second vertical being event source integrations, which is ESMs that developers love when they use Lambda. And the third vertical being the product of AWS Amplify.
Awesome. That's how you do a lot. Oh, thanks for being here. Thank you for being here. All right, Sridhar, tell us about what you do from a product perspective and how long you've been at AWS.
Hey, thank you for having me on. First of all, I'm Sridhar. Like I said, I've been with AWS and serverless for 4.5 years at this point, and I lead the product space for developer experience. That specifically includes all of developer experience, including our developer tooling. So anywhere you interact with our APIs, console, and so on, and our developer tools, observability, and integration with third party operational tools.
Awesome sauce. And last but certainly not least, Yoel, tell us what you do at LocalStack. I know what you do, but most people probably don't. So,
hello everyone. Yeah, welcome back. So thanks for having me back on the stage. So at LocalStack, I'm here for about 3 years, and I've worked on almost everything about Lambda, being it Lambda, event source mapping, pipes, but also other service integrations like step functions. And my team in this context has built this cool integration together with the partners at AWS. So very excited to show and bring this new developer experience to you as developers for fastening your feedback cycles.
And everyone loves a faster feedback cycle. Can we all agree? Awesome. Thank you all again for being here. So we're going to start this off like kind of discussion style, conversational. And I've got a couple of questions. Is it okay if I just start shooting, or I guess I can't really say that, not in this climate. So if I asking questions, is it okay if I start asking questions? Great. So why is local testing important, especially in a serverless environment?
I think many of us can answer that, but I can try it out. I think one of the main things about serverless in general is that it allows you to start fast, right? The whole intention behind it is that you're able to not worry about infrastructure much, and you just have your idea, you code it, you develop, and then you're like very close to have like a production ready application. And local testing helps a lot with that. So even though of course you can go to the console too and like create a function there, and that's can be your first step to try things out, like after you have like a very simple application, you want to go to your IDE, you want to try more things, you want to install dependencies, you want to try things out. So that ability to test things quickly locally, and you can modify things and not having to worry about updating to the cloud. Maybe you don't have like a good connection, maybe things are slow. You can do a lot of things locally without having to even think about the cloud at first. You can do a lot of things locally. There's a few other reasons. Because you're doing things locally, you don't have to worry about costs. If you're doing locally, especially with LocalStack, where you have like all your infrastructure locally, then you don't know like, oh, if you suddenly have like a Lambda functions that's running too many times, then it's all just local, right? You're not thinking about the cloud. Those are some of the good things that like local testing allows you to do.
Yeah, one of the key things that I would add more on what Renato was mentioning is that your serverless application usually is going to be a collection of services that you're using together, right? You're using, let's say, an event-driven architecture where you have SQS, where you have Lambda connecting maybe to a DynamoDB, where you're persisting some information or state. Now, if you're building a monolithic application locally, it's easier to think about testing, debugging, because it's maybe, let's say, a single file or a collection of files that you're testing. But when you're using serverless application, you have multiple technologies that are working together to run your application. Now, when you think about local testing a distributed application, it's always difficult to fathom, like, how would you do that? In most cases, developers would go to one technology, let's say Lambda, figure out what's going on wrong there, then go to, let's say, DynamoDB or SQS, figure out from the logs what went wrong. But imagine running the whole thing like a monolithic application. I know I'm oversimplifying things here, but imagine running these bunch of technologies together locally, which you can emulate. You could use SAM CLI for that. You could use LocalStack for that. Imagine the power of it, right? You can iterate through it. You just mentioned the point of the accelerated development loop. That's the key focus here. And that's the key value that you get out of this system. It's a distributed system, but it runs locally. Like that's the power of local development that allows you to move super fast.
Really good points. Like I can't. There's you can't point at a cloud dev that's like, oh yeah, I like taking 15 plus minutes to spin up my stack so that way I can test it. And I'm sure everyone would be would prefer to like shorten that feedback loop and get to the root cause of their problem quicker. All right, so that kind of leads into the next question that I have, which is, what are some use cases for local versus cloud testing?
Yeah, there are few differences, and at the end of the day, everything is a process, and you're probably not going to test only locally, and it's probably hard to test only in the cloud. So it's probably a process that you are kind of evolving during your development cycle, where local testing, and there's even like different options for local testing, and there's SAM CLI, for example, which is like the most simple way of local testing, where you just have your functions code, and you don't need to like deploy it, like you don't need to put it in a real function. It's just you have your code and you locally testing. That allows you to test like your function logic, because it's a simple, it's you don't want to like interact with other services, you can do that. But then if you have LocalStack, you can test interactions between different services. You can test what happens for different use cases. Sometimes your production infrastructure, you don't want to change it. You don't want to interact with the production resources. So then local testing allows you to test, and local testing with LocalStack allow you to test those interactions in a fast way locally. So it allows you to like this that we were talking about, the rapid iteration. So you can do it fast. But then at one point, it's like, okay, I have my logic, I have my integration between services working, and then you go to the cloud and you still need to test in the cloud. It's not I test in local and then goes to production. Usually you have to test how things, for example, if you have a VPC, how does the connections in the VPC work? How are your permissions, right? Because LocalStack allows you to forget about permissions for a minute. It's like, okay, I have local, I won't break anything because I'm local. But then at one point when you move to the cloud, you need to consider about, okay, do I have the right permissions? Not only like on the one hand, you want the least amount of permissions so you don't affect anything else, but also you need to know that you have the necessary permissions for everything. So it's different steps in the development cycle where when you move from like very simple local to like at the end testing in the cloud.
Very good. That makes sense. It's just like a quicker, less expensive way to get get feedback. Now, last question that I have, anybody can answer. How did the AWS and LocalStack partnership start?
I think Scheuner has like first-hand information about it, but I can
Yeah.
explain it. But if you wanna,
Yeah, Sridhar has an amazing story. He's running around, and maybe
Yeah.
he can talk about his reinvent story.
Sure. Yeah. And just to sort of lay out context, right? Peter Smith, who now is a PM at LocalStack, he used to be a principal engineer at Amazon in Canada before he moved all the way down south to New Zealand. And so he had worked on a specific launch last year for Step Functions team with JSON Nada support. So that was I would say in the serverless space the first foray into LocalStack and the partnership with LocalStack. And obviously once he went over, I think that he had already realized the value. That kind of lent itself very well. And on a parallel track, I was at reInvent, our annual conference in Las Vegas last year in December, and previously, the team, Renato, myself, and a few other folks on the team, we had talked about simplifying, local development experience and local testing for serverless applications, and LocalStack was obviously on our radar for that. And at reInvent, between meetings, as folks who have been to reInvent would know what I'm talking about. Essentially, most people are running between meetings between hotels or different parts of two hotels. So you'd rarely find people walking. People are mostly running or on those walking things, the escalators, but the walking things. I can't remember the name of what those things are called. So I saw Waldemar, the CTO of LocalStack. I did not know who he was at the time. I just remembered he was wearing almost a similar shirt as Yoel is wearing right now. And I just tapped on his shoulder. I was like, look, I'm running, but there are some interesting things we need to talk about. We exchanged numbers. And then over the next few days, Waldemar, I can't remember if there were a couple other folks, and we met a few times over the next few days. And I came back, and then we kind of made it more formal, and we pulled the whole team from both sides. And and here we are about 9 months later with a lot more to show for.
That's a great story. It's like a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
And there you go. 9 months later, like magic happens. Awesome. So I know we're gonna be doing a little or a short demo. I want to do some housekeeping first and foremost. It is, well, if you guys have questions, anyone that's watching has questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat. You don't have to wait until the end. We'll be answering questions, or the speakers will be answering questions throughout the demo. So yeah, Yoel, do you want to get things going from your end?
Yeah, I'll start summarizing the 3 things we launched. So about 2 weeks ago, we launched, and I think we can put probably the link in the description. So if someone can help maybe doing that in the backstage. So that's the launch post, and that summarizes the story nicely. So we launched 3 things about 2 weeks ago. First, the AWS Toolkit for VS Code integrates now with LocalStack. That has been asked a lot. It's been the most upvoted feature on GitHub in the open source repository from AWS. And we've listened to the users' request, and we've brought in very easy single-click profile switching capabilities that I will demonstrate a bit later. So this enables to connect LocalStack with the AWS Toolkit and use most of the functionality of the AWS Toolkit with LocalStack together. But we went further on and say, look, what can we do in order to facilitate the lives of Lambda developers? And the second thing we launched is the Lambda debugging for LocalStack. The AWS has launched an amazing feature. It's kind of like the first ever cloud debugging feature, so where you within your IDE can connect to a live Lambda function in the cloud and use an interactive debugger. AWS has launched this, and now with the launch about 2 weeks ago, we've made this possible and brought this integration here into LocalStack. And the third thing is the new LocalStack toolkit for VS Code. In order to make it easy for users to set up LocalStack, we at the LocalStack side built an IDE extension into VS Code that makes the entire setup process as easy and smooth as possible. You can manage your LocalStack instance and get started with the AWS Toolkit easy. And if there are no further ado, then let's jump into the demo. All right, thanks for the screen share. So here I have an IDE instance of Visual Studio Code, VS Code Open, and a project with AWS SAM. AWS SAM is the serverless application model. I have a single application here, and what I brought up is the welcome screen. If the welcome screen doesn't show up right away, you can also reach that under these 3 dots under the application builder walkthrough, and you will end up in this installation guided page. So you can install the AWS CLI, the SAM CLI. You're going to need Docker if you want LocalStack. And at the normal part here is the single click button to install LocalStack, to emulate the cloud resources locally without connecting to the AWS cloud. So let me walk through the installation and show how easy it is to get started. I'll click the install button. It asks me to install the extension. I'll confirm, and the extension has been installed and prompts me with this setup wizard. If I miss this, I can also go to the status bar that recognizes, LocalStack is not installed. So let me run the setup wizard, which downloads the CLI, the LocalStack CLI. I can choose to install it for the current user, so I don't need to enter my sudo password. It will then set up the credentials for me. And at that point, if you don't have a LocalStack account, it can forward you to the page and we can sign you up for a free account. So no credit card required. I signed up before the demo for a free account, and so I'll continue, and it will bring me into a browser window. I've logged into my LocalStack account, and this is now prompting me to open the link, which will transfer my authentication token to start LocalStack Pro, the LocalStack Pro image, into my local environment. So I confirm to open the link on the browser side, and also confirm to open the link on the toolkit side. And this will set up my authentication, and LocalStack is ready to start. At this point, I can hit the LocalStack start button, and it will show LocalStack is starting. I can always refer to the status bar to see what's the current status of LocalStack. I can also view the logs here, and I did one thing to make it very verbose. So I set up a configuration flag to show debug logs, and that might be too verbose. So I can also use the full functionality that is built into the IDE in order to change the log levels. So here, if debug is too verbose for me, I can switch to info logs, or I can see, please show me only warnings, and then kind of like first detected that it cannot be found and then installed it. So this allows me to have a lot of fine-grained control, even more fine-grained control through these filters on how I want to view the LocalStack logs. What happened is, in the background, we have launched now a local cloud. So we can see, if we go to the containers view, this will show me my running Docker containers, and I have a LocalStack Pro container running that is running on port 4566, and this is giving me access to my LocalStack cloud. So it's running in the background. All right, so now let's focus on how we can switch easily from being connected in the AWS Toolkit to the real cloud into LocalStack. On the left side, I switch back to the AWS Toolkit view, and at the top, I have the Resource Explorer. I'm currently connected with an AWS profile to my real AWS account, to my LocalStack Sandbox account, and I can browse different regions, and I can see I have, for example, a couple of Lambda functions deployed in one region. I have like a couple of other Lambda functions deployed in another region. And this gives me access to multiple regions in the AWS cloud. And imagine you want to kind of emulate your cloud locally, we can now go to this bottom left corner where we have this AWS profile that says it's currently connected to the Sandbox profile. And let me switch to the LocalStack profile. This LocalStack profile has been created automatically through the setup for you by the setup wizard. We can have a look at it in a second. But let's just do it, confirm it, click at the profile, and now I'm connected to the local running cloud instances. And I have like different regions and have a locally running cloud available. I can see there are no resources in there, so no Lambda function in neither region. And just to showcase how easy it is, I can switch back to the Sandbox profile, can see, well, these are my real cloud resources in AWS and running on LocalStack, the emulated cloud. I click the LocalStack profile and I have access to a blank environment. And it's as easy as just like restarting LocalStack if you want to have a blank environment. And yeah, at this point, I think it's also, we can also have a look. It's kind of like, yeah, how can we interact with the resource browser? So let me create a bucket, and anyone maybe ever tried to create a test bucket. In the real cloud in AWS, bucket names need to be unique. So that's an operation that would likely fail. If I do it here in LocalStack, I can see my test bucket appears here, and I can also see the server-side logs that the bucket has been created on the server, and the list bucket call has been used from the Resource Explorer to display this bucket. So that's pretty cool. But the profiles, they don't stop here. So they're even more powerful. So let us open a terminal and see what we can do with the profile. Let me clear the terminal to give you a fresh view. I can use the profile as an environment variable, or in a similar way as a -- profile CLI option in common AWS tools, such as the AWS CLI, and such as the SAM CLI, CDK, and other AWS tools. So I'll use the LocalStack profile, and I'll list these buckets, and with that, I can just list the bucket that I've now created in my local cloud. How is this possible? So let me take 5 seconds to delete my real credentials, then I can show you the full configuration. There we go. I'll bring up this other window. So under my AWS directory, so if we look in the parent working directory, it's the .aws directory. I have two files, basically credentials. And in LocalStack, you can use test credentials. So that's done. The most interesting part is this LocalStack profile that defines an endpoint URL. In this case, localhost.localstack.cloud, which resolves to my local IPv4 and connects to LocalStack in order to connect different AWS tools to LocalStack. And at this point, also kind of want to bring back Renato. Kind of like, is there anything else you want to highlight about this feature? It's so cool. So such an easy way to switch between the real cloud and LocalStack. If I'm
Yeah, and I think and you showed a little bit. One of the things that are pretty interesting to me is that I guess we've been talking about, like, we did this partnership with the Lambda team, but everything in the toolkit, the idea is that you will just use the new profile. Like, you showed S3, right, and you created a bucket right away from there. And even if you have like a bucket of part of your application, you can also use that to see the objects in your bucket, and you can upload elements in your bucket. And then also in a Lambda function, we added a feature also a couple months ago that you can directly edit a function right there using the AWS Toolkit. which is, of course, in the cloud, it's similar to what you do in the console. That even though you have like a CI/CD pipeline, sometimes you want to change just a small file in a function. Now you can do that in the toolkit. So everything in the toolkit now starts working with your LocalStack profile, right? And every future improvement that we'll do in the toolkit will also be able to be used with LocalStack profiles. So that's something that I think it's very interesting, because now that's the intention, right? That LocalStack is just behaves the same way that as any other one of your profiles.
Yeah, that's amazing that we can access the resource browser and what other functionality the AWS Toolkit provides and integrate directly into LocalStack.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about are there any challenges you or your team faced? Was this an easy way kind of like to make this profile switch, or what was the consideration also maybe with the integration with other tools?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I guess the main thing is, like, the AWS Toolkit is an open source tool. You can see the code in GitHub. You mentioned how the issue of supporting LocalStack profile had been open for a while, and the situation that, like, it's open source. In theory, anyone can go see the code and change it. It's a big code. It's a big repository. There's a lot of moving parts here, and there are constantly new features. So it wasn't necessarily easy to just go ahead and change this, like add support for profiles. But it's just, yeah, as anything in software development, if you take enough time, you can figure out like all the details. Sometimes that time is years, sometimes it's minutes, but we work there in, yeah, understanding the code. It, like I said, it's a big code. It has like all these different sections. We needed to make sure that it works correctly. Also, the yeah, there's a specific way how the SDK works with the custom endpoints. So there were some like edge cases for different services that were not straightforward to just configure the endpoint. But yeah, it was an interesting case about it looks like such a small change, but at the end of the day, it's like a lot of moving parts, a lot of interconnected pieces of code. So it was definitely an interesting part to work on.
Great. Thanks for the background of that. And to the audience, if you have any questions, now is the time. You have like a lot of like VIP folks from AWS here. So type your questions in the chat. Let us know what you think. And yeah, as Renato mentioned, let's move on with the demo to showcase some of these features that the AWS Toolkit provides and that we can now use together with LocalStack. So one of these features is the application builder. Application builder is based on the AWS SAM model, a serverless application model. And an easy way to understand a serverless application is to open the infrastructure composer. So under the hood, this is a YAML file. It's a superset of CloudFormation, and it defines a couple of resources. But to get an easy understanding, we can open this with the application composer. Let me make this a bit bigger in order to show this a bit better. And that's what we are dealing with. So on the left-hand side, we have an SQS queue that has a subscription. And whenever we enter an entry into that queue, that an event source mapping will pick up that entry and process it in a Lambda function. And the processor function, we can open the details. It's a Python 3.13 function. And something to keep in mind for later, this function has a timeout configured of currently 3 seconds. So keep that in mind when we come to the debugging part. How fast are you in debugging a Lambda function? Is 3 seconds enough? Yeah, let's ignore the DLQ. In case something goes wrong, it would end up in the DLQ here. But yeah, that's the application. And as I've shown before, the AWS CLI is able to use these profiles, and so is the AWS SAM CLI. So I can now use SAM and then a profile, a LocalStack, and just deploy the application. Or even more conveniently, with this now native integration of out-of-the-box integration, I can click the Deploy SAM application button, and I think it canceled the scanning of it, so that might have affected the detection here. Let me rescan it and see whether this works. Otherwise, I'll just deploy it through the AWS profile by environment variable, AWS profile, LocalStack, SAM deploy, should deploy the application. And if I wouldn't have canceled the scanning of the templates, this would have worked directly from this button in here. So what's currently happening is it will deploy these resources of that application, of the SAM-based application, into LocalStack, and I can refresh here, and I can see the S3 resource of the application. I can open that the deployment bucket, and for example, I can open the template, and this is containing the SAM template to deploy the button, and the other part is the packaged Lambda function code. I think SAM-related resources, and we can also go into the Lambda and see that here we have this Lambda processor function now deployed on LocalStack. The stack is successfully created, and at the bottom here, I can also open this panel, and this processor function now has an entry here that gives me cool functionality like directly searching to logs or remotely invoking the logs. And as Renato mentioned, on the left side, I can explore all the resources that LocalStack, that the AWS Toolkit supports that are deployed in LocalStack. So currently, I still have my LocalStack container running. And these are the resources that I can explore from the AWS Toolkit. So another way to showcase this, and sometimes developers find it very convenient to go to the AWS console to explore what resources are deployed. And currently, we're able to do this all within the IDE. If you want, you still have the option and LocalStack gives you the option to use the Resource Explorer, or similar to AWS console experience. So I have the local host of localstack.cloud. This is the LocalStack web interface that connects to my locally running cloud, to my locally running LocalStack instance. And I can, for example, look at the SQS queues that are deployed. And here is the deal queue, and the other one is the queue. So in this queue, if I remember the architecture correctly, if I send a message, then it would trigger the Lambda function. So I can test my entire application end to end. So hello meetup, and let's send the message, and the message is there. And in a few bits, what we expect is LocalStack would spawn up another container that launches the Lambda function, and we can go to the containers and see we have now an official AWS image with the Python 3.13 Lambda function running. And if we go back here and refresh, that message is gone. That message should have now been picked up by the Lambda function and processed. So we can also go back to the AWS Toolkit and see here, we can search the logs, look into the last 15 minutes or all time, no filter pattern, and we can see hello meetup. The message has been processed. So that's one way of working together end to end with my application locally. But imagine you want to now iterate on that Lambda function, want to make some changes, or want to debug it or invoke it, just focus on this part. So iterate on the Lambda function. So let me close the logs here. And the best entry point here is in your application builder. If I click on that invoke remotely, it has all the information from AWS SAM and will pre-fill everything that's needed later on for debugging the function. But let's start by just invoking it. So this remote invocation panel allows me to remotely invoke the function, and we know the function consumes an SQS event. So let's search for an SQS event, and that's hello from SQS for the meetup. And let's just invoke it and see what happens. There we go. The message has been processed by this Lambda function. All right. So, but sometimes just invoking and kind of like is not enough, and we want to have more control. And this is where our real cool feature that we launched recently comes into play. With one click, here you see this remote debugging toggle. If I click this, it will set up everything for you in order to interactively debug this function. I'll click it, and it automatically detected the source code of that function through AWS SAM that is laying in the app.py directory. Let me close this on the left side to make it a bit better to show. Put the source code on the left side and the function widget panel on the right side. So we see it's running in US East 1. You can choose different region. LocalStack emulates all the supported regions. And it's running on LocalStack. If you want, you can configure more additional configurations. So if you want a TypeScript function, you can do, or you can say debug just my code or debug extra system code. If you want TypeScript, you can do source mappings. But if I just interested in this code and debug it, I can set a breakpoint. On the left-hand side, we see a simple Lambda handler that takes an event, and if the event is there, we'll iterate over all the records and print them, catch an exception. What we can do here is now I can click here and into the gutter at line 11. I add a breakpoint by just clicking as we would usually use debuggers in our local IDE, and by remotely invoking it, everything will be set up for you automatically. So we're waiting for the execution environment, sending an invoke, and here we are. We have an interactive debugger that gives us all the control and the power of interactive debugging. So I can now debug my Lambda function in my LocalStack environment. So I can inspect the event and look at the body of the event. It's not the event, it's called the record. And that was our message that we typed before. And I can even change it. So I can say something, the body should now be hello meetup, two exclamation marks. I can change it. I have all the local variables here. I can have step over, or I can just continue execution. And at the end, I'll see the result, hello meetup. So that's pretty amazing. I'm seeing, do we have some questions, or Kia? Do we have some questions from the audience, or?
Well, actually, so I don't see any questions in the chat, but I have some questions. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well.
Perfect. Okay, so what are some common pitfalls developers run into when trying to debug serverless applications, and how does this new integration help?
So I think the AWS team can probably speak more about it. As one thing is, if you have like if you're running in the AWS Lambda model, there are certain assumptions. So for example, the first invoke is a cold start, and then afterwards you have like certain code paths that are only executed the first time and other ones are executed later. And you can now debug this with this integration. For example, I can add a print statement like init, and then I can add a change like print statement like handler, and that init code will be only executed if the function is running into cold start. So if there's no pre-warm environment up there, and there are certain details about this model. Also, there are certain dependencies installed within that function. So you have certain assumptions, and you can debug within exactly the same environment. Also, you have like different event types and kind of like, how does this event look like? And then you can fix an event, iterate over it. You can also, Lambda's functions often, they're not alone, that they don't live in isolation. So you would use, for example, an S3 client or DynamoDB client to write into other AWS services. And with this debug integration, you would be able to set a breakpoint and just adjust your code, debug, and change this directly. And some of my thoughts, but yeah, maybe Renato or someone else from the AWS team has some more insights, or kind of like what would be common pitfalls that we can now fix much easier with this integration.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess, and one of the things that kind of it's the main point of the remote debugging that we launched 2 months ago in this is Lambda is designed to be a very secure environment, right? Here, if you're running LocalStack, everything runs in your computer, right? So you can just open a port in your own computer and then debug and connect directly to that. But in Lambda, you can't do that, right? In Lambda, you can't open a port. In Lambda, you can't just SSH or connect to the environment where the Lambda function is running. So the situation there, and it was like why I guess we didn't have debugging from a long time ago. There's a specific connection that had to be done to achieve this debugging, this remote debugging, right? Because by default, when you run your function, it runs and you can't interact with it other than invokes. So the technical explanation is long, but the way that the remote debugging works, it uses an IoT secure tunnel, which is, like the name say, like a secure connection basically between two different parts. So we do a complicated process, so then your function can send the debugging messages to your computer. Basically, both your function and then your local environment connect to the two ends of this tunnel. There's of course like a key involved, is like all the security, so the connection only happens in this debugging. But that's kind of one of the I guess the pitfalls before is like, okay, there was no way to interact with a running function before. Now, thanks to this, you can do this, and of course, Joel is showing the local stack version, but this also works when you're connected to the cloud. So that's at least that's one of the, I guess, similarities, but the differences between the cloud and local stack is how the debugging process works, even though you see it the same. And for people that use this, they will see, okay, yeah, and the cloud is exactly the same as what Joel showed. But then behind the scenes is where we actually had to do things in a very different way. And one of the other things is that all the feature that we did, you don't need to change your code, right? And we saw that Joel didn't add like a import debug py or start debugging or anything. It's just do a checkpoint. We basically configure everything for you, and that's kind of what happens when you click the remote debugging thing. The function is configured to be in this debug mode. So we need, like, the runtime actually starts differently when that happens, because you don't want all your invokes to be in debug mode, which is like slower, and it uses more resources than just regular executions. So that's where we've found like very important use for this remote debugging, and after we launch, we've seen like a very good reception for it.
Okay, that very good. We do have a couple questions from the chat. Cowboy Tone, thanks for your question. Asked, does LocalStack support AWS AppSync? And if so, can you show examples?
I think AppSync is supported by LocalStack. So if you go to LocalStack AWS AppSync, the best entry point is the documentation. You can see that it's a fully managed service, and you can go to the API coverage section at the bottom and can see is the operation that you need supported, and you can filter it by implemented, and it's and here you can see which of the operations are implemented. I don't have an example, by the way, here to showcase in the next few minutes, but I think that's the best entry point. And here we even have linked a couple of examples, and otherwise also feel free to reach out to the community Slack channel support for more.
Great. Can we throw that link into the chat real quick, so that way Cowboy Tone can have a look? We got another question from the audience. Mateo, are the debugger functionality complete, or okay? Is it like the watch, change value, etc.?
Yeah, so from what I've seen, maybe someone from AWS can also comment. So if I can showcase one thing and then answer your question right inside. So if I make a change handler v2, I think I've stopped the scanning. Then it would automatically suggest me to update the function. But let's just showcase this right away. Let me set the breakpoint again, set the remote debugging. So currently it's supported for Python, Node.js based and Java based. And here you can see you have the local variables. You can also use watch expression. You have the call stack. So I'm not aware of any particular limitations. It's attaching to a remote instance running in a separate container. So you can see you have like a separate container that is connected to that port. But yeah, hope that answers the question. Otherwise, feel free to follow up. So it depends a bit on different languages. For some languages you might, and for some projects you might need to configure extra additional configuration, especially if you're using TypeScript and source mappings. But otherwise, it should work. And one thing to point out is here, what's important is that this widget that sets up the remote debugging needs to know where your code lives. And I often recommend look at this open handle link. And if this open handle link points you to the right source code file, then you're good to go. If not, double check and maybe update your local source, browse your local code, or you can even download the code automatically.
Good to go. I hope that answers your question, Mateo. We've got another one from Enrique. Thank you, Enrique, for your question. Enrique says, if the Lambda is created with CDK, does the debugger work the same?
Yes.
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 Awesome.
And I guess one of the things, just to add a little more detail, the demo was showing the application builder where with a SAM template, it identifies where your code is, and it kind of basically lays everything out for you right away. If you deploy with CDK, I guess the only difference is that you need to provide where your code is. So it's like if you start here from the Explorer, it's like, okay, that's my function that was created. If you didn't do it from the application builder, then basically this is just a cloud function, so it doesn't really know where your code is. But then how Joel showed, you can just browse the local code and then say, okay, this is my handler. So that's, yeah, but the answer is yes, it does work. And it's basically any function.
Yeah, that's what Renato said. You can basically browse the handler, and that would be working then the same way. Or the other thing is, if it's deployed via CDK, it would also show up here as a Lambda function. And if I click the function here, it will automatically download the function code for you, and you have a local copy. And when you download it this way, then and I click remote debugging, then it also fills the temporary path that it downloaded it out for you automatically. So then you have this setup simplified. This is possible for Python and Node.js based lambdas. For Java, the download is not possible, and you need to select it manually. But you can debug any Lambda function. There are different ways of showcasing, of telling VS Code where does your code live, because it needs to know your code in order to set breakpoints and interact with it.
Okay, great. So Mateo has a follow-up to Enrique's question. Does it work the same even when the Lambda is bundled or minified? Great question.
With minification and TypeScript node-based lambdas, you can have source maps. So I don't have a TypeScript example ready here, but we can probably link that in the chat. So let me open the browser. We have GitHub, LocalStack samples, and we have LocalStack pro samples. If we go into the pro samples, we have a Lambda debugging sample for TypeScript, and there's also some kind of documentation that tells you what you need to do in order to make sure that the source maps are discovered depending on how you configure it. So I'll put it in our chat, and I think someone can help putting it into the chat and share it with the users, so you can have a look at this example for bundling or minifying. I guess that should cover that part.
Sweet. Awesome. It looks like we got there some community members were able to be helped and have their questions answered. I love the discourse. Thank you all so much for coming on and explaining more about the LocalStack integrations, your AWS Toolkit. Folks that are out there watching, if you haven't yet, go ahead and update your VS Code AWS Toolkit to the latest version, and you will be able to interact with LocalStack and utilize LocalStack in the way that Yoel and the AWS crew has just showed. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So again, we're always available on our community Slack. Slack.localstack.cloud. Come to us for any of your questions or your customer feedback. Any closing thoughts? We have one more minute. Are there any sneak peeks that we could get from you all for the for what's next in serverless developer experience that anyone's willing to share?
There is a lot more to come, is all I can say. And between now and the close of the year, there are more things happening. So you'll see this drip going.
Okay, you guys heard it first. Stay tuned. Awesome. Well, thanks again, and thanks everyone for watching. And we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.